There is a truth inside every human being, a truth we spend our entire lives trying to avoid, not because it is evil, not because it is dangerous, but because it is uncomfortable. Deep within the human psyche lives something Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not a monster. It is not a demon. It is simply the part of you that you refuse to become. The anger you buried, the ambition you denied, the power you were told was wrong. And the tragedy of human life is this: the more we hide from the shadow, the stronger it becomes. Most people are taught from a young age that the darker parts of their personality must be suppressed, ignored, or destroyed. We are told that anger is bad, that ambition is selfish, that pride is dangerous, and that power should be hidden. Slowly we begin to believe that the only way to be accepted is to show the world only our polite, gentle, and socially acceptable side. But what happens to the rest of us? What happens to the emotions, instincts, and desires that do not fit into the image we try to present? They do not disappear. They retreat into the depths of the unconscious mind, forming what Carl Jung called the shadow. The tragedy is that most people spend their entire lives believing that this shadow is their enemy. They believe it is something shameful, something dangerous that must never be acknowledged. But the truth is far more complex and far more powerful. The shadow was never meant to destroy you. It exists because it is a natural part of the human psyche. Just as every object in the physical world casts a shadow when exposed to light, every personality casts a psychological shadow when it develops a conscious identity. The moment you decide who you want to be, there are automatically parts of you that you decide not to be. Those rejected parts do not vanish. They become the shadow. Within this shadow are many things you were once taught to fear. There is anger, yes, but anger can become the force that protects your boundaries. There is ambition, which when guided properly becomes the drive that pushes you to achieve greatness. There is pride, which when balanced with humility becomes confidence. Even aggression, when controlled and directed, becomes courage. The shadow holds raw psychological energy, the untamed forces of the human spirit. When people reject these forces completely, they often become weak, passive, and disconnected from their true potential. But when people acknowledge them and learn to guide them, those same forces become sources of strength. Imagine someone who refuses to admit they have the capacity for anger. They try to be kind at all times, agreeable at all times, peaceful at all times. On the surface, this may appear virtuous, but beneath the surface, something dangerous is happening. Because the anger has not disappeared, it has simply been buried. Over time, it accumulates pressure in the unconscious mind. Eventually, it may explode in ways that surprise even the person experiencing it. Sudden rage, bitterness, resentment, or passive-aggressive behavior can all be signs that the shadow has been ignored for too long. But if that same person learns to accept the existence of their anger, everything changes. Instead of pretending it is not there, they become aware of it. Awareness allows them to understand it, to channel it, and to transform it. That anger can become assertiveness. It can become the courage to say no. It can become the strength to stand up for themselves and protect what matters. What was once feared as darkness becomes a tool for growth. This is the deeper wisdom behind Jung's insight. The shadow is not evil in itself. It is simply unconscious power, power that has not yet been understood, power that has not yet been disciplined. If left in darkness, it can manifest in destructive ways. But when brought into the light of awareness, it becomes a source of vitality and authenticity. Many of the most confident, grounded, and resilient individuals in the world are not people who have eliminated their shadow. They are people who have faced it. They have acknowledged the parts of themselves that are imperfect, intense, or uncomfortable. Instead of running away from those parts, they took responsibility for them. They learned to shape them into something constructive. True maturity begins when a person stops pretending to be purely good and begins the more difficult task of becoming psychologically whole. Wholeness does not mean becoming darker or crueler. It means recognizing that human nature contains many layers: light and shadow, compassion and strength, gentleness, and intensity. When these forces are balanced and integrated, they create a personality that is both powerful and conscious. The shadow, therefore, is not an enemy hiding inside you. It is a part of your own nature that is waiting to be understood. It is the hidden storehouse of instincts, emotions, and energies that can either sabotage your life or empower it, depending on whether you choose to ignore it or learn from it. And the moment you stop running from that inner darkness, you begin to discover something remarkable. What you once feared within yourself may actually contain the strength you have been searching for all along. Keynote 2. What you hate in others is often your shadow. Expend it more lengthy without heading. One of the most uncomfortable yet powerful truths about the human mind is this: the qualities that disturb us the most in other people often reveal something hidden within ourselves. When we feel intense anger, irritation, or judgment toward someone else, it is rarely just about their behavior. Very often, it is a reflection of something buried deep in our own psyche, something we have not yet accepted, something we have pushed into the shadow. Carl Jung observed that the human mind has a natural tendency to project what it cannot face within itself. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism. It allows the ego to protect its image of being good, moral, and socially acceptable. Instead of admitting that we possess certain impulses, flaws, or desires, we unconsciously place them onto others. We see them outside of ourselves rather than recognizing them within. This is why certain people trigger such powerful emotional reactions in us. Think about the individuals who provoke the strongest feelings of dislike or discomfort. It might be someone who appears arrogant, someone who seeks attention, someone who is aggressively ambitious, or someone who openly expresses their opinions without fear. At first glance, we believe our reaction is purely about their behavior. We tell ourselves that they are wrong, rude, selfish, or immoral, but beneath that judgment, there may be another truth quietly waiting to be discovered. Sometimes what we criticize most in others represents a quality that we secretly possess, but refuse to acknowledge. A person who strongly condemns arrogance might actually carry a hidden desire to be recognized or admired. Someone who harshly criticizes people who pursue power may secretly fear their own capacity for influence or leadership. The person who is constantly irritated by confident individuals may be struggling with their own suppressed confidence. The mind, in an attempt to protect the conscious self-image, pushes these qualities into the shadow. Once hidden there, they do not simply disappear. Instead, they begin to appear in distorted ways through our perceptions of others. We become highly sensitive to traits that resemble our own suppressed qualities. It is as if the unconscious mind is constantly trying to reveal something to us, but we keep misinterpreting the message. This does not mean that every flaw we notice in others exists equally within ourselves. Human beings are capable of recognizing genuine problems or harmful behavior in the world. However, when our emotional reactions become excessively intense, when our judgments feel unusually personal, or when we cannot stop thinking about someone's faults, it is often a signal that the shadow has been activated. Consider how often people become obsessed with criticizing others for qualities they secretly struggle with themselves. The person who constantly accuses others of dishonesty may be fighting with their own temptation to deceive. The individual who aggressively condemns selfishness may have deep, unacknowledged desires that they feel guilty about. The mind creates an illusion that the problem exists entirely outside, allowing the person to maintain a sense of moral superiority while avoiding self-examination. But true psychological growth begins the moment a person asks a difficult question. Why does this bother me so much? That question opens the door to self-awareness. Instead of immediately blaming the outside world, we begin to look inward. We start to examine the emotions that arise within us when we encounter certain behaviors or personalities. We begin to wonder whether our reactions might reveal something about our own hidden nature. This process requires courage, because the shadow rarely shows us things that are comfortable. It may reveal suppressed anger, jealousy, insecurity, or a desire for control. Yet it may also reveal something far more surprising: our hidden strengths. Sometimes what we dislike in others is not simply a flaw we share, but a quality we secretly wish we could express. For example, a person who has always been taught to be quiet and obedient may feel intense irritation towards someone who is bold, outspoken, and unapologetically confident. On the surface, they may label that person as arrogant or rude, but beneath the judgment there may exist a buried longing, the longing to speak freely, to express opinions without fear, to occupy space in the world without constantly shrinking themselves. In this way, the shadow not only reveals our weaknesses, but also points toward our untapped potential. It shows us the parts of ourselves that were rejected during our development. Perhaps they were discouraged by parents, criticized by teachers, or judged by society. In order to belong, we learn to hide them. But the psyche never forgets. Every strong emotional reaction we experience toward others can therefore become an opportunity for self-discovery. Instead of simply condemning what we see, we can pause and ask what the experience might be teaching us about our own inner world. This does not mean we excuse harmful behavior, but it does mean we recognize that our perceptions are shaped by the unseen forces within our own minds. The more aware we become of projections, the less power they hold over us. We begin to reclaim the qualities we once pushed into the shadow. We recognize our own capacity for ambition, confidence, anger, or vulnerability, and we learn to manage these forces consciously rather than denying them. And when this happens, something remarkable occurs. Our relationship with other people begins to change. The world no longer appears as a battlefield filled with enemies and irritations. Instead, it becomes a mirror reflecting the many layers of the human psyche. Through that mirror, we slowly begin to understand ourselves. Keynote 3. The shadow holds your hidden potential. Expend it more lengthy without heading. There is a common misunderstanding about the shadow that causes many people to fear it. Most believe that the shadow contains only negative qualities: anger, jealousy, selfishness, and destructive impulses. Because of this belief, people assume that confronting the shadow means discovering something terrible about themselves. But Carl Jung understood a deeper and far more hopeful truth. The shadow does not only contain darkness. Hidden within it are also the parts of your personality that were never allowed to grow. The shadow becomes a container for everything the conscious mind rejects. Sometimes this rejection happens because society labels certain traits as bad or dangerous. But very often people also push their greatest strengths and talents into the shadow simply because they were discouraged from expressing them. Think about how a human personality develops. As children, we naturally explore many sides of ourselves. We are curious, imaginative, emotional, bold, and expressive. But as we grow, we begin to receive messages from the world around us. Parents, teachers, and society start shaping our identity by telling us which behaviors are acceptable and which are not. Some qualities are praised while others are criticized or punished. A child who speaks loudly and confidently might be told to be quiet. Over time, that child learns that expressing their voice leads to disapproval. In order to avoid rejection, they begin to suppress that natural confidence. Eventually, they become a quieter person, someone who avoids attention. But the original energy, the desire to speak, to lead, to influence, does not disappear. It simply moves into the unconscious mind, becoming part of the shadow. Another child may be naturally creative, full of imagination and unusual ideas. But if those ideas are constantly dismissed as unrealistic or impractical, the child may eventually abandon that creativity. They might grow into an adult who believes they are not imaginative at all. Yet deep inside, the creative potential remains buried, waiting for an opportunity to re-emerge. In this way, the shadow becomes a hidden archive of unrealized possibilities. It holds the talents, ambitions, and passions that were once part of you but were pushed aside in order to fit into expectations. When people say they feel lost or disconnected from themselves, it is often because many of these essential parts of their personality were never allowed to fully develop. This is why exploring the shadow can be such a powerful experience. It is not merely an encounter with your darker impulses. It is also a rediscovery of forgotten strengths. Many people who begin the journey of self-awareness are surprised by what they find within their shadow. They discover courage they never thought they possessed. They uncover creativity that had been dormant for years. They reconnect with passions that once made them feel alive. The reason these strengths remain hidden is because they are often tied to qualities that society considers uncomfortable. Leadership may require assertiveness, which some people were taught to see as aggression. Creativity may require independence, which can appear rebellious. Ambition may involve a desire for recognition and success, which some cultures label as selfish. In order to maintain acceptance, individuals learn to hide these traits, even though they may represent their greatest potential. The tragedy is that when people suppress these energies for too long, they begin to feel empty or incomplete. They may follow a safe path through life, doing what is expected of them, yet feeling a persistent sense that something important is missing. This feeling often arises because the shadow contains vital aspects of the self that are still waiting to be integrated. Reconnecting with these hidden parts does not mean becoming reckless or uncontrolled. It means acknowledging the full range of your psychological nature and allowing those buried energies to be expressed in healthy, conscious ways. The confidence that was once suppressed can become leadership. The curiosity that was once dismissed can become innovation. The intensity that was once feared can become passion and determination. Jung believed that personal growth requires us to recover these lost pieces of ourselves. The process can be challenging because it forces us to question the identity we have built over many years. But it is also liberating. As the shadow is explored and understood, the personality begins to expand. We become less restricted by the narrow roles we once believed defined us. In this sense, the shadow is not merely a place of darkness, it is a gateway to transformation. It holds the raw materials of your future self. Within it lie the instincts, talents, and energies that can push you beyond the limits you once accepted. When those forces are recognized and integrated into conscious life, they become sources of creativity, resilience, and authenticity. He person who dares to confront their shadow often discovers that what they feared most was actually a doorway. Behind that door lies the part of them that was never given permission to exist. And once that part is welcomed back into awareness, the individual begins to experience life with a deeper sense of purpose and possibility. Because sometimes the greatest power you will ever discover about yourself is not something new. It is something that was always within you, patiently waiting in the shadows to be seen. Keynote 4. Real strength comes from integration. Expend it more lengthy without heading. Human beings often grow up believing that strength means perfection. We are taught to eliminate weakness, suppress negative emotions, and present a flawless version of ourselves to the world. From an early age, people begin building an identity based on what is socially acceptable, admirable, and safe. They learn to highlight certain qualities while hiding others. The goal becomes simple: appear good, appear strong, appear in control. But beneath this carefully constructed identity lies a deeper psychological reality that many people never confront. True strength does not come from pretending that the darker or uncomfortable parts of the personality do not exist. In fact, the attempt to eliminate them completely often leads to inner conflict and instability. Carl Jung believed that psychological maturity is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. Wholeness means acknowledging that the human psyche is complex and contains many opposing forces: light and darkness, compassion and anger, humility and pride, gentleness and power. When a person denies half of their nature in order to appear virtuous, they create a divided self. The conscious mind presents an image of kindness, patience, and moral certainty, while the unconscious mind quietly stores every steed Ted. Hing that does not fit this image. Over time, this separation grows stronger. The individual becomes more rigid, more defensive, and more afraid of anything that threatens the identity they have built. Ironically, the attempt to appear perfectly good can make a person psychologically fragile because it requires constant effort to maintain the illusion. Integration is the process of bringing these separated parts of the psyche back together. It begins with honesty, the willingness to admit that within every person there are impulses and emotions that may not always align with the image they wish to project. This does not mean surrendering to destructive behavior or allowing darker impulses to control one's actions. Instead, it means recognizing their existence and learning how to direct them consciously. Consider the emotion of anger. Many people believe that strength requires eliminating anger entirely. They try to remain calm and agreeable at all times, believing that this proves their maturity. But suppressed anger rarely disappears. It simply waits beneath the surface. When ignored long enough, it can transform into resentment, bitterness, or sudden emotional explosions. Integration takes a different approach. Instead of denying anger, the individual acknowledges it as a natural human emotion. They learn to understand its source and use its energy constructively. Anger can become the force that motivates someone to defend their boundaries, challenge injustice, or take action in difficult situations. The same principle applies to other aspects of the shadow. Ambition, for example, is sometimes treated as selfish or dangerous. Yet without ambition, many great achievements would never occur. Pride can become arrogance when it is uncontrolled, but when balanced with self-awareness, it becomes healthy confidence. Even aggression, which is often feared, can transform I into courage and determination when guided by conscious intention. Integration, therefore, requires discipline and awareness. It asks a person to accept responsibility for the full range of their psychological nature. Instead of pretending that certain impulses do not belong to them, they learn to recognize those impulses as part of their internal landscape. Through reflection and self-examination, they begin to understand how these forces influence their thoughts and actions. This process also creates a deeper sense of stability. When individuals accept both their strengths and their flaws, they become less defensive and less dependent on maintaining a perfect image. Criticism from others no longer threatens their identity as deeply because they already acknowledge their imperfections. They no longer waste energy hiding from themselves. That energy becomes available for growth, creativity, and purposeful action. Integration also brings balance. A person who embraces only softness may struggle to protect themselves in a harsh world, while someone who relies only on hardness may become disconnected from empathy and compassion. But when both sides of the personality are recognized and developed, the individual gains flexibility. They can be gentle when the situation requires understanding and firm when the situation demands strength. Jung referred to this lifelong process of integration as individuation, the gradual unfolding of the complete self. It is not something that happens overnight. It is a continuous journey of self-discovery where the individual becomes increasingly aware of the many layers of their psyche. Each layer that is acknowledged and integrated adds depth and authenticity to the personality. Real strength emerges from this wholeness. It is the strength of someone who understands their own nature and therefore cannot easily be controlled by unconscious, ageist forces. It is the strength of someone who has faced their fears, accepted their imperfections, and learned how to transform their inner conflicts into sources of wisdom. Such a person does not claim to be flawless. Instead, they possess something far more valuable, self-knowledge. And from that knowledge comes a quiet confidence, the understanding that every part of the human psyche, when brought into awareness and guided with intention, can contribute to the development of a powerful and balanced life. Keynote 5: If you ignore the shadow, it will control you. Expend it more lengthy without heading. One of the most important psychological truths Carl Jung revealed is that whatever we refuse to recognize within ourselves does not simply disappear. The human mind has a remarkable ability to hide uncomfortable emotions, desires, and impulses from conscious awareness. We push them down, deny them, and convince ourselves that they are not part of who we are. But the unconscious mind does not erase these rejected elements. Instead, it stores them in the depths of the psyche, where they continue to exist and influence our lives in ways we often fail to notice. When the shadow is ignored, it does not remain silent. it begins to express itself indirectly. Because it has been denied conscious recognition, it seeks other ways to emerge. This is why people sometimes act in ways that surprise even themselves. They may suddenly experience intense anger, jealousy, insecurity, or resentment that seems to appear from nowhere. In reality, these emotions have been building in the unconscious for years, waiting for an opportunity to surface. A person who constantly denies their anger may believe they are calm and peaceful. They may pride themselves on always being patient and agreeable. But beneath that controlled surface, frustration and resentment may slowly accumulate. Without awareness or healthy expression, that suppressed anger eventually demands attention. It might appear in sudden emotional outbursts, passive-aggressive behavior, or a constant sense of irritation toward others. The individual may feel confused about why these reactions occur, not realizing that they are witnessing the shadow asserting itself. The same pattern can occur with many other aspects of the personality. A person who refuses to acknowledge their ambition may find themselves secretly jealous of others who succeed. Someone who denies their desire for recognition may become unusually critical of those who enjoy attention. A person who believes they are completely selfless may develop hidden resentment toward those they constantly sacrifice for. In each case, the rejected parts of the personality continue to operate beneath the surface, shaping thoughts, emotions, and behavior without conscious permission. This is what Jung meant when he suggested that the unconscious can control a person's life when it is not made conscious. When individuals refuse to examine their inner world, they become vulnerable to forces they do not understand. Their reactions become automatic, their emotions unpredictable, and their decisions influenced by hidden motives. They may believe they are acting freely, yet much of their behavior is being guided by unresolved elements of the shadow. Ignoring the shadow can also distort how people perceive the world around them. Unacknowledged fears, insecurities, and desires often shape our interpretations of other people's actions. A person who secretly doubts their own worth may assume that others are constantly judging them. Someone who hides their own competitiveness may view every interaction as a rivalry. Because the shadow remains unseen, its influence is mistaken for objective reality. The danger of this unconscious control is that it prevents genuine self-understanding. When people refuse to look inward, they search for explanations outside themselves. They blame circumstances, other individuals, or society for their frustrations and struggles. While external factors certainly play a role in life, the unexamined shadow often amplifies problems by creating internal conflicts that remain unresolved. Yet the moment a person becomes willing to face their shadow, the situation begins to change. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. When an individual acknowledges that certain emotions or impulses exist within them, those forces lose much of their hidden power. Instead of acting unconsciously, the person can begin to observe their reactions, understand their origins, and decide how they want to respond. For example, recognizing the presence of anger allows someone to explore why that anger arises. They may discover that it is connected to past experiences, unmet needs, or violated boundaries. With this understanding, the anger can be transformed from a destructive impulse into a signal that something important requires attention. The same is true for other aspects of the shadow. Awareness turns unconscious reactions into conscious choices. This process does not mean eliminating the shadow completely. The shadow is a natural and permanent part of the human psyche. What changes is the relationship we have with it. Instead of allowing it to operate secretly in the background, we bring it into the light of consciousness, where it can be understood and guided. Jung believed that individuals who ignore their inner darkness risk becoming controlled by it, while those who confront it gain the opportunity to transform it. The difference between these two paths is profound. One leads to confusion, repeated mistakes, and emotional instability. The other leads to self-awareness, responsibility, and personal growth. In this way, the shadow presents a choice to every human being. We can continue pretending that certain parts of ourselves do not exist, allowing them to influence our lives from behind the scenes. Or we can face them honestly, learning from them, and gradually bringing them under conscious direction. The path of awareness is not always comfortable, but it is the path that leads to genuine freedom. Because the moment you recognize the forces within your own mind, they can no longer quietly dictate the direction of your life. The goal of life is not to become perfectly good. That is impossible. The goal is to become fully conscious. To walk into your darkness and bring back your hidden strength. To face the parts of yourself you once feared. Because the truth is this: inside your shadow lives the energy of your transformation, and the person you are capable of becoming is waiting on the other side of that confrontation. So do not run from your darkness. Study it, understand it, integrate it, because the greatest power a human being can possess is this: self-knowledge. And the moment you accept both your light and your shadow, you stop living half a life. You become whole.